At the high school reunion, he arrived, a real success story, with a gorgeous girlfriend on his arm. "You know," she said, glancing my way, "if you hadn't let him go, you'd be Mrs. Sterling by now." He sat across from me, his arm around her, his expression cool. That's all in the past. Of course, everyone else jumped on the drama train, egging things on. Under his gaze, I quietly covered the scar on my wrist, managing a weak smile. "Yeah, we're way past that. Wasn't it Chloe who broke up with him?" Someone chirped, the second his girlfriend went to the ladies' room. "Chloe, that's me." Jake Sterling, he was sitting right across from me, a faint smile playing on his lips, his eyes cold as ice. It was the first time we'd seen each other in 6 years since our split. It had come totally out of the blue. I'd only come because the reunion committee said Jake wasn't showing. I guess I should have known. Jake is now, like, a big deal. A seriously successful young entrepreneur, a guy who did the whole study abroad thing and came back to make a killing. He was looking all sharp in his tailored suit, his watch alone probably worth more than my car. Everyone was hanging on his every word. Me, well, I wasn't doing so hot. "Yeah, she dumped me first," Jake said, answering the question as if it were just idle chatter. Everyone was whispering, making their guesses. I was a gold digger, couldn't handle hard times, bet on the wrong horse, and now I was totally screwed. "Chloe, wasn't that dude you were with after Jake, the one who went to prison?" Someone asked, not even trying to be discreet. "Did you come to this thing to get your money back?" Through all the jabs, Jake's deep, dark eyes stayed fixed on me, and he didn't say a word. I just gave an awkward laugh and didn't respond. Then, the door swung open, and Jake's girlfriend was back, sensing the weird vibe immediately. "What did I miss?" she asked with a bright, wide smile. Jake's whole demeanor shifted. He took her hand with a soft smile. "Just catching up, that's all." She took her seat, her gaze settling on me, a dimple appearing in her cheek as she smiled. "Jake's mentioned you. Said if you hadn't called it off, you'd be Mrs. Sterling." A few people exchanged knowing looks. Back in the day, my family had been a big deal, and I had been like the star in the sky to everyone. Those jealous feelings hadn't gone away. If anything, they were giving people fuel to kick me while I was down. Jake cut through the awkward tension, his tone cool but firm. "That's all in the past." That shut everyone up. They knew they had touched a nerve and changed the subject quickly. His girlfriend raised her glass to me. "Thanks for letting him go, you're a lifesaver. You have to come to the wedding." I quietly covered the scar on my wrist and, with a forced smile, said, "Congratulations." "Why didn't you explain what happened?" My best friend, Sarah, was ranting over the phone, sticking up for me. The reunion had wrapped up early, and I was shivering in the cold air outside. "He's got a girlfriend, Sarah?" There was a pause on the other end. "A girlfriend?" Sarah sounded like I had just told her the world was flat. "Yeah." The other people from the reunion were splitting into groups, getting rides or just wandering off. The streetlights reflected off the snow, looking like broken glass. "I can't believe you actually saw him, you've been working so hard." "Sarah, nobody waits around for anyone anymore. Some things are better left unsaid. Bringing it up now would just make things worse." The cold wind made my eyes water. I blinked to try and clear them. "I'm done." I had busted my butt, pulling myself out of the dirt to show him I was still someone. It was all for nothing. "Okay, well, come home so we can talk about it." The temps were already below freezing, and getting a cab was a nightmare. I stood for a while, getting frostbite on my fingers. My phone said, "You're in the queue." Behind me, I heard the click-clack of high heels, followed by a woman's soft voice, "Babe, the snow looks so pretty." "It's freezing out here, get in the car, I'll be right there," said Jake's unmistakable voice. "Okay, hurry," she said. As she walked past me, she gave me a knowing glance. I could see the bracelet on her wrist, a piece of family heirloom jewelry that I gave back to Jake the day that we broke up. She wasn't just a girlfriend, she was the future Mrs. Sterling. Everyone else had cleared out, leaving just Jake and me. My ride still hadn't shown. Jake stood behind me, silent. There we stood in silence, just two shadows under the streetlight. I could feel myself slipping back to the night we broke up. Jake had been in a car accident on his way to see me. His buddy called me, his voice grim. "Jake's in the hospital. Is he okay? Would you come if he wasn't? Take care of him. Chloe, he got a scholarship to go overseas. He's going to be someone. Why can't you just wait? You're so greedy for money, you can't possibly be serious. Everything he's done for you, you're just going to throw it all away like it's nothing." His friend was losing it on the phone. I was being called a horrible person through and through. The phone was snatched out of his hand and hung up hard. It's like I threw him away. Of course, he hates me. "How much do you owe?" Jake said, his voice cold. "It's none of your business." I sucked in the frigid air. The alcohol made my throat burn, and I choked on a cough. The cold air shredded my throat, bringing a sharp pain. I bent over, grabbing the streetlight pole, my stomach twisting up, and the alcohol began to churn. Tears stung my eyes. Jake stood next to me, not moving. Then, my cab pulled up. The driver poked his head out. "You going to the Prestige Estates?" "Yeah." I steadied myself, about to pull open the door, when Jake grabbed my arm and yanked me back. I fell into him, and he asked, "What do you want there?" The Prestige Estates is a gated community, not just anyone could go in there. I tried to pull away. He grabbed my wrist tightly. His hot skin against mine sent a jolt through me. I pulled, but he didn't let go, and I looked up at his dark, unreadable face. "What's up, Mr. Big Shot?" He pressed his lips together, his black eyes calm as a mirror. The cold wind whipped my hair. I smirked and said what I knew he was thinking. "You think I'm a geisha, right? Is $5,000 a month enough?" Jake cut me off, sounding cold. "What are you talking about?" Jake's eyes finally showed a glimmer of disgust. "You need money, right? $5,000? 10? You tell me." My hand flew up and slapped him hard, the sharp crack echoing in the empty street. A woman cried out in shock and hurried out of the car. "Get over yourself and have a nice life. I don't need anything from you." I got in my cab and left him standing there. "You hit him?" Sarah poured me a mug of hot water. "Yeah, he wanted to pay me," I said, curling up on the couch, my stomach aching. I gulped down the water, hoping it would help. A few minutes passed, and I suddenly lurched to the bathroom to throw up. Sarah patted my back. "You shouldn't drink on an empty stomach." I caught my breath, wiping the water off my lips. My throat was raw. Was it worth it, chasing after him after all this time? I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my lashes wet, my hair sticking to my forehead, my face pale. Sarah's voice drifted from the other room. "If you hadn't broken up with him, he wouldn't be where he is today." I thought of Jake's fiancée. She had a glow and a confidence that I recognized. I had been like that, once upon a time. I had taken so many hard knocks, and I had to fight so hard to drag myself back up. By the time Sarah finished up at the Prestige Estates, we were holding hands, walking back to our place. My phone rang. It was Jake's buddy. "Chloe, if you're struggling, I can get you a job." I didn't say anything, letting him continue. "They're getting married next month. Her name is Ashley. She's a nice girl, great family, and I won't bother him anymore. Don't worry." He was quiet for a moment. "We just want Jake to be happy." "Okay." It was like everyone from back then had taken Jake's side. I hung up. Sarah's eyes were red. "They don't get it." "It's fine." Since I was staying for a bit, I got a job not far from the apartment. During the interview, the HR person looked at me suspiciously. Do you have a history of depression? It's in the past. I've got a doctor's note. I had been turned down by so many other companies that it wasn't even funny. This place was smaller, and I got the offer that night. I figured that run-in at the reunion would be the last time I'd see Jake. Then, 3 days later, Jake was parachuted into my company as my boss. And they moved my desk right outside his office. No way. Sure, Jake said, not even looking up, hand in your resignation to HR. I actually laughed. You're firing me because I won't change desks? His pen froze and finally, he looked up at me. I'm just giving you a choice. Did you think I wanted something from you? I cringed, remembering what Sarah had to do for rent money, and gave him a weak smile. You're such a magnanimous boss. I'm not worried. Jake nodded briefly. You're welcome. Close the door on the way out. And turn your chair, so I don't have to look at your face. After that, we barely spoke. Then, a week later, the company had a team building event. As the newbie, I was pressured to drink. Come on, Chloe, if you don't drink, you'll get docked. Don't worry, we'll get you home safely, it's all women here, what's the worst that could happen? The manager laughed, pressuring me to drink, and I took that last shot, passing out on the table. The next day, I woke up in a giant bed. The sun was blinding. I pushed myself up, the blanket sliding off, and I saw I was wearing a soft terry cloth robe. I got up and walked out. Jake was in the living room, feet up on the table, reading the newspaper. He was wearing a robe from the hotel, too. Seeing me, he raised his eyes and said, "You're up? Breakfast is on the table, go back to sleep after." I felt a wave of panic, my face going white. What happened to us? Jake tossed the newspaper on the table and loosened his robe, showing a hickey on his shoulder. Unfortunately, it was you who made the first move. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. I didn't remember anything from the night before. That's not possible. Jake put a contract in front of me. It had my thumbprint on it, and basically said I was going to be his mistress for 10 grand a month. I'd never sign this. Is that right? Jake smirked. You sure about that? His unwavering gaze stopped me dead. He pulled out a recorder. Last night, I recorded some of your monologue by accident. You wanna hear your disgusting thoughts, Miss Chloe? I felt like I had just been submerged in a frozen lake. A huge wave of humiliation crashed over me. It was bad enough that I had these thoughts. Now they were proof, like I was a criminal. Jake was looking at me, face unreadable. Coveting a married man, what a mess. I can't wait for them to hear this. What do you think? My hand clenched into a fist, my nails digging into my palm. Are you getting revenge on me? Yep, he said casually. You didn't care about me, why would I care about you? 2 choices. You fulfill this contract or I send the recording to everyone. The clock ticked on the wall. My heartbeat thumped, hammering in my ears. My lips were cracked. I was too numb to move. Then share it. Under his gaze, I whispered. Jake, I won't be a homewrecker. Jake looked at me and then laughed. Who do you think you are, Chloe? Do you even have a choice? I found my clothes in a pile in the bathroom. Jake's clothes were hung up neatly on the rack, a clear line between his stuff and mine. I felt a sharp pain in my heart. I sighed and got dressed, then left the hotel. Sarah called. Her voice was shaky. Chloe, they want 50 grand. The sky was gray, no sun in sight. Sarah hadn't been able to save any money for my treatment. My savings were pretty much gone. They said if I don't pay up, they'll expose your story, and they won't tell you where your mom's stuff is, or where they put her ashes. I'll try and get an advance, and borrow from a few people. Maybe I can get the money next month. Okay. I hesitated a few times, but finally dialed a number. It took a while for him to answer. "Miss Chloe, what's up?" I huffed into the cold air, saying, "Dr. Johnson, sorry to bother you, but It sounded like Dr. Johnson was in the middle of something. He found a quiet place, then asked patiently, "Are you having trouble?" I took a deep breath. "Can I borrow 40 grand?" It was the first time I had ever asked someone for money. My face felt like it was on fire. The line went static. "Dr. Johnson, emergency surgery." "Got it." I didn't really expect much, and got ready for him to hang up on me. At the last second, Dr. Johnson said, "Send me your bank info, I'll have it to you today." Then, he hung up. The sky was still gray. That cold, static noise had warmed up. That evening, my boss tapped on my desk. "We've got a dinner with clients, you're coming." Just a few hours before, I had gotten an advance on my salary. Between that, the borrowed money, and what I had left, I finally had the money. Walking into the private dining room, I saw Jake. His tall frame was greeting everyone. The light from the chandelier highlighted his good looks. My boss pushed me forward. Everyone's eyes were instantly on me. "Mr. Sterling, is this someone from your company?" Jake gave a casual glance. "Yep, the newbie." "What kind of newbie needs Mr. Sterling's personal attention?" "Pretty cute." Everyone sat down. My boss sat me next to Jake, whispering, "Be smart tonight. If someone offers you a drink, take it." Everyone said, "Mr. Sterling, can she handle her liquor? Or not?" My boss replied before Jake could even open his mouth, "Oh yes, yes, she can." He pushed a glass in front of me. "A toast." Jake smiled and began tapping his fingers lightly on the table. I took the glass, held my breath, and gulped it down. The burning alcohol flowed down my throat, igniting a fire raging in my stomach. They cheered, but before they could continue, Jake changed the subject. "Where were we? Let's pick that up again." He refused to drink, and my manager kept refilling my glass, so I ended up drinking way too much. I finally had to go to the bathroom. I threw up, my hair falling in my face, and I was a mess. I texted Sarah, then leaned over the sink, too weak to move. Footsteps approached, slow and steady. The door opened. I thought it was one of the other women. Then, I heard Jake's calm voice, "Is that all you've got?" I forced myself to stand and tried to walk past him, but he grabbed my arm and dragged me back. His hand went to the back of my neck. It was burning hot. "Let me go." My throat burned, and each word was like a knife. Jake pulled me to the mirror, making me look at myself, and sneered. "You go out looking like this, and you'll have every creep breathing down your neck." My eyes were wet, my face red, my hair falling in my eyes, my shirt open. Jake's eyes roamed over my body in the mirror. My body began to tremble. "Is there anyone more of a creep than you?" Jake chuckled, then leaned in, kissing my ear. "Come home with me tonight, what do you say?" "Get away from me." He shut my mouth with a kiss, sucking the air from my lungs. My blood burned with alcohol, like a hot, roiling lava. The lights blurred together, the drops of water on the sink appeared through a fuzzy film. It was like a constant drip, like acid on my heart. It was a living hell. I was weak, barely able to push him away. It was like I was back in that dark place again. Hopeless, looking out at that bright world. "Jake, just let me go." I was sinking, falling into a hole. It hurt. But I couldn't feel anything. "Chloe!" Jake was shouting. It wasn't the look in his eyes where he wished I would die. He was scared. I couldn't tell if this was the Jake from back then, or the Jake of now. I said, "Jake, I never want to see you again." The fever hit me hard. I was confused, and my body ached all over. I shook in bed under the blankets. Outside, the wind was howling. I was half asleep, drifting back to the past. I was on Jake's back. I asked, "Jake, what if I die?" He carried me on and said, "Don't say that. You have a fever, that's all. A shot will fix it." "Are you sure you can afford this? Shots cost money." "It's not a problem." "It is a problem. How many jobs do you even have?" Jake didn't reply. He placed me on the seat at the nurse's station and kneeled in front of me and said, "As long as you're okay, I don't care." I curled up in my jacket and mumbled, "When Mom and Dad stop fighting, I'll ask them for money." Jake brushed my hair out of my eyes. "Trust me, we'll have money one day." I wasn't like he hoped I would be. The night before the competition, I came home to find my dad with another woman. My perfect life fell apart. My parents were fighting, my dad disappeared, and my family went into debt. One night, men came to my house. The light swinging over my head, men yelling, the pain and the dirty feeling, my mother's scream, all became one big mess in my head. It was like someone pressed fast forward. My mother was forced to kill herself in the tub. Sarah found me. She brought me away to a city in the south. One rainy day, I curled up in a corner of the hospital, wearing funeral clothes, looking hopeless. "She has a genetic history of depression. Does she have any family?" Sarah looked at me with worry, saying, "She has a boyfriend. He's away at a competition." "Tell him to come," the doctor said. "She's got some serious self-harm tendencies. She needs constant supervision for years. You should be prepared for a long haul." I was too sick to even think about calling the police. Sarah and I were running from a life that we used to know. The same day, Jake's name was number 1 on the list. He was accepted to study abroad. He called me. The wind was blowing over the phone. "Chloe," he said softly, "I did it. I'll marry you in 3 years." I looked at the gate that was closing and knew that I would never be home again. "Jake, I don't think I can be with you anymore." I tried not to cry. He was silent. "Why?" My mouth opened, and, for just a second, I hesitated. His future was bright. Was I really going to be selfish enough to drag him down? Outside, I saw the faces of so many people who were in pain. I saw the love disappear from his eyes, and it made me hopeless. I wiped my tears and said, "Jake, go be great. We're not going to work." I could hear the machines beeping. The sun was coming through the blinds, throwing lines of gold on the couch. I blinked and the nightmare began to fade. I sat up. A man was sitting on the couch, quietly peeling an apple. His fingers were long and clever. A perfect apple emerged. Clean and ready. It was Jake. He heard me and looked up. He stood and pressed a button on the wall. The doctor came in, checked my eyes, and, after making sure I was fine, said to Jake, "She's not eating well. She needs more protein." Jake nodded. "Thank you." The door closed. He walked to the bed, offering the apple. "Don't think too much. You need to get better." I didn't take it. Instead, I got out of bed and began to search the room. My phone was gone. And so was my street clothes. He let me look around the room. "Jake, what are you doing?" I was standing in the sun, looking at my pale reflection in the glass. "What do you think I'm doing?" Jake set the apple on the table, grabbed a napkin, and wiped his hands. "I want you." He was sitting there in the light, his black eyes looking at me, hot and shameful. I began to tremble. "Jake, you can't do this to me." Jake stood and came over to me, his hands in my hair. "Why not?" "I like someone else. Stop bothering me." "Oh really?" Jake's face was expressionless. He cupped my face and leaned in, his lips stopping an inch from mine. I couldn't pull away. My body began to shake. Jake laughed, his voice cold. "Chloe, you're a liar." The private hospital was out in the sticks. All that was visible out the window was a sea of trees. I couldn't get out and I couldn't talk to anyone. I tried asking the doctors and nurses for help, and they said that it was out of their hands. Jake came every day. Mostly in the evening, he came from the city and just talked to me. I tried not to touch him, and Jake didn't force it. I kept having these dreams of the past. I was always talking about Jake. I'd say, "Jake, you're going to be rich and famous someday." Jake sighed, "What kind of milk do you want today?" "Banana." Just to get banana milk, Jake had skipped class for the first time and got in trouble. Then, I went to college. There were rumors about him and a cheerleader. I took the train and sat outside his dorm and cried. Jake ran downstairs to find me. "Stop crying, I'm yours if you want me." "You're not supposed to confess like that." He hugged me. "I love you." Back then, we could never have guessed things would turn out the way they did. I'm getting married tomorrow. The sun was just starting to set. Jake's voice pulled me back. "What do you want to say to me?" I was holding my milk and looking at his face. I realized why I had been dreaming about the past. I was saying goodbye to the Chloe and Jake of yesteryear. They were on TV, all smiles. They were perfect together. That was the future we had hoped for. Now, Chloe is covered in debt and has no right to that future. "Congratulations," I said. "I hope you have kids." Jake stopped peeling the apple, his knife grazing his finger, drawing blood. He stared, put a paper towel on it, and laughed softly. "It's okay, we're just going through the motions. Do you want kids?" "I don't care." "Jake, can we please stop? I was so tired. Let's just be adults." Jake dropped the apple and looked at me, saying, "Stop? Why? You were the one who started this. Then you wanted to move on, like it was nothing. What am I to you? A dog?" I closed my eyes. "I give you back to them." Jake's face froze. "What?" I looked at the sunset. "You want me to hurt, and I can go die." My face was grabbed, and I was forced to look at Jake's face. "Chloe, are you crazy? You're so eager to die, why didn't you go die then?" I don't remember when he left. Later that night, Jake's buddy, Mike, burst into my room. "Chloe, what did you promise him?" He immediately asked that, and I was totally confused. "Do you know how much money Jake is going to lose by breaking his engagement? You're an adult now, you can't be like you were back then, just doing whatever you want, and having Jake bail you out. Can't you think of him? What is it minus?" "What is it?" Mike yelled. "Jake is breaking up with his girlfriend because of you. What do you think it is?" My ears were ringing, I was sitting there numb, not knowing what to do. Did Jake say it's my fault? It's not, he won't let me go. Mike's face was icy. "If you had stayed away, this wouldn't have happened." His voice screamed into the snow, and the cold wind froze all of my senses. My ears were ringing. I couldn't hear. His face was full of hate. Like I should go die. "Mike, he won't leave me alone." Mike just stared at me, cold as ice. "After this, I'll send you away." The office building was lit up. Mike pulled me through the door, but the press conference had already started. Jake was sitting under the lights. "Is it true that you're breaking off the engagement because of a mistress?" Jake replied, calm as ever. "Ashley and I have some issues. We're separating on good terms." Mike paled, his hand grabbing my wrist, not letting me move. "But I heard you're seeing your old flame." Jake said, "Just rumors. If there aren't any other questions, I think we can wrap things up." As he stood, someone yelled, "She's here." "That's her." Every camera turned towards us. I was in the spotlight, a mess. The reporters came at me. "What is your relationship with Jake?" Are you ruining a marriage? The cameras were flashing in my face. Jake's smile suddenly froze. He got up and pushed through the crowd. No. I didn't. I tried to answer, but I was swallowed by the noise and the questions. I got a new leak. One of the reporters yelled, waving a phone. It had my voice on it. I was crying. Jake, I love you. It was the recorder. I was terrified. I didn't think that anything else could make my life worse. This storm was my destruction. She's a mistress. Shameless. Everyone was whispering. My face turned white. The recording had pinned me to the wall of shame. I'm sorry. Mike, get her out of here. Jake pushed through the crowd. He had never looked like that before. My mind went blank. I heard him say, her dad ran out on her, mom killed herself, has a genetic history of depression, was in the hospital for 5 years, she's a psycho. The crowd gasped. Why are psychos allowed to go out? She's a nut job. Why doesn't she go die? Jake froze, staring at me. He was in shock. Disbelief. I was sitting there, my blood running cold. Chloe. Jake was yelling at me, his voice shaking. I knew what was coming. I was calmly waiting for the final blow that was going to destroy me. She was also a victim of sexual assault. That was the final line from the leak. When I heard that, Jake went white. 9. Jake's perspective. Jake hadn't said anything since that day at work. His blinds had been closed for 3 days, keeping the light out. His phone screen was filled with calls. He didn't open one. It was like he had paused himself. Jake sat there, head down, lifeless. He kept thinking of the coldness in Mike's voice. Everyone wants her alive. Mr. Sterling is so good that without even trying, he can make all of our work worthless. Sarah was yelling at the security, Jake, do you know that she gets sick if she doesn't have her medication? You're keeping her locked up. It's like killing her. Depression. Mental hospital. The words were like little knives in his head. Mike knocked on the door, opening it a crack, and said, You okay, bro? Why? Jake's voice was raspy. Mike paused. Sorry, I just thought it wasn't important, so I didn't check. The data was false? Jake asked quietly. Mike, when you told me she was dating in Europe, she was in the hospital in the South. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It sounded so lame. He couldn't blame Mike. If he had only asked one question, it might not have turned out like that. Jake was too tired to argue with Mike. Sarah came through the door. The bright light made Jake blink, but he didn't stop her. Sorry, Mr. Sterling, I couldn't stop her. It's okay, Jake said. The door closed, and the room went dark. Sarah just stood there, looking like she couldn't even breathe around him. Mr. Sterling, it's time to talk. The wind was howling outside. Jake sat there, silent, just listening. If you do something wrong, you're going to pay. One way or the other. Last year, on Chloe's birthday, I asked who she liked most. She said, first it was her mother, then it was you. Jake closed his eyes. The words felt like ice. Back then, she was just getting better. She just needed her medication, and she was normal. So this year, I brought her home so she could clean up her mom's stuff. Sarah's eyes were red. She said she broke up so badly, she just wanted to see you again, and see that you were doing good. She knew that she was too low for you. Jake, is she too low for you? Do you know how she got you your spot at the competition? Jake's hand tightened, he could see the things that would break him down. They had already picked someone else. Chloe wrote a letter, demanding fairness, and you got it. She ended up making some enemies. And when her dad ran out, she and her mom got so much crap. The information was hitting his heart. She was hurt. Was that it? Sarah continued. You were out of town. You didn't call for a week. So you probably don't know that her life was a disaster here. Her dad ran off, the creditors were at the door, trying to kill her and her mom. Her mom killed herself, and Chloe was hurt, and she ended up sick. She was so messed up, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was a mess. Sarah was staring at Jake. When you had the car accident, Chloe wanted to let herself die. How could you do that? Jake went white. He had kept thinking about what he'd done the last few months. He had allowed the manager to get Chloe drunk and put her in his room. He had tempted her to tell the truth and then faked the contract, all so he could see her squirm. He had insulted her over and over again. He had put her in that hospital and ignored Sarah when she came to his door. He asked if she was crazy. He asked why she didn't kill herself. Chloe's face was empty, and she just looked at him. He thought that it meant she still loved him. But it meant that Chloe was asking, "How could you treat me this way? Why? Didn't she tell me?" Sarah started to cry. How could she have? She was so sick. She only wanted to keep the people who she cared about from being dragged down. She thought that your career was more important. That competition was her chance to give you a better life. She only wanted you to be okay. Jake, did she deserve to die? Did she deserve to die? The question was a hammer to the heart. He was the one who bothered her, teased her, watched her crumble. It was him. We tried a lot of things to get her to want to live. But only one thing worked. Jake was scared to listen. Sarah smiled sadly. Your name. She would always talk about her mogul. When I left last time, I joked with Sarah that I was never coming back to this place. Turns out, you can't say things like that. I got sick again. The South only has dry winters. Usually, it's all freezing rain. But this year, it was snowing for the first time ever. The doctors and nurses were chatting, saying, "It's a cold one this year, huh? The planet is getting less and less habitable for humans." It was almost Chinese New Year, and the trees outside were bare, not a leaf left. I pressed my face against the window, breathing onto it, creating a little fog. There's someone downstairs. He's been standing out there every day. Isn't he cold? Sarah walked past with a mug of hot milk, her face expressionless. Oh yeah? He must not be, I guess. She hadn't been in a good mood lately. Even Dr. Johnson seemed off. I was walking on eggshells, afraid of setting either of them off. Sarah stopped, realizing I looked nervous, and softened her tone. Drink your milk, take your meds in an hour. Dr. Johnson said he'd take you out to build a snowman tonight. I looked at the person again, and he looked kind of familiar. Sarah pulled the curtain closed. Don't look, you'll go blind. Okay. I got back into bed, took my meds, and started playing a game, leaning against my pillow. I could hear Sarah and Dr. Johnson talking outside. Then, he opened the door and walked in. I quickly hid my phone, sitting up straight. I took my medicine. The smell of disinfectant filled the room. Dr. Johnson's eyes scanned over me, finally landing on my face. Miss Chloe, I'm not going to yell at you for playing games. My face flushed, and I slowly pulled out my phone. How did you know I was playing a game? I play too, I know the background music. Dr. Johnson washed his hands, took off his white coat, and looked at me through the mirror, a smile playing on his lips. Aren't you going to get dressed? We agreed we'd build a snowman. He was a cardiac surgeon at the hospital. I first met him in the fall, I think. The weather was nice that day, and I was picking up a ball of yarn outside the gate. Dr. Johnson walked past, looking down at me. I was out of breath. Excuse me, would you help me pick that up? He looked at the hospital sign and said, according to the rules, you can't touch anything that might be dangerous. When I didn't move, he asked, what do you want to do with it? Play cat's cradle. Dr. Johnson checked the time and knelt down. I'll play with you, and then I'm taking the string. He only had a short lunch break. I quietly reached through the gate, and we played for a little while. When it was time for him to leave, I said, "Thank you." I saw him a few times after that. He was always busy, and he didn't talk to me. Then one day, he came over and pulled out a string. "Sorry, I've been too busy." Later, he started talking to me. "You don't talk much." "Yeah, I shouldn't say too much." "Why not?" "I'm sick, and I probably can't say anything happy. I can't burden people with my problems." Dr. Johnson just stared at me. Then, he came over more often. Sometimes he looked exhausted. I tried learning some jokes, and told them to him. Dr. Johnson always looked at me with a kind smile. He asked, "Chloe, what's your wish?" "I hope that everyone is happy, including me." I quickly got dressed and waited for Dr. Johnson to put on his coat. He took my hand and led me downstairs. There were security checkpoints everywhere. Only he could take me outside. It was snowing outside, and the snow was building up fast on my hat. Dr. Johnson handed me a small shovel. "Take it easy." "Okay." The cold air lifted my mood, and I took the shovel and walked around the frozen fountain. I turned back around and saw Jake standing in the distance. His eyes were bloodshot, his face covered in stubble. He was just staring at me. "Jake?" My voice was soft, a little surprised. Jake moved his lips. "Chloe, I was wrong." I used to yell, "What did you do wrong?" Now I was just holding my shovel, looking at the ground. "It's fine." I had seen too many hardships. My edges were smoothed away. The wind howled. Jake came closer, kneeling in front of me. "How can it be fine? Chloe, please say something, okay?" I thought a minute and said, "I hope we all have a healthy new year." Jake's face went white. Tears streamed down his face. "Please don't do this to me." I touched his face. He was cold as ice. So, like back then, I cupped his face in my hands and said, "I wanted to see you again. It's a disaster." "I'm sorry," Jake said. "If I had only. I left you. It's no one's fault." I spoke slowly. I felt sad. "I went to the reunion because the chair said you wouldn't be there. I don't know why he lied. I just wanted to see if you were okay." Jake was crying. "I'm sorry, it was my fault." "Okay," I smiled, not knowing what to feel. "Chloe, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you." Jake held my hand. He had noticed the scar on my wrist. "You don't have to say sorry. I didn't want you to be stuck with me. I didn't want us to have a hard life and start fighting and asking who did what to whom." I brushed the snow off his eyelashes. "I'm so happy you're doing so well." "But I said I'd make money for you." Jake said. "Without you, what's the point?" I blinked, my nose frozen, and said, "See this scarf? It's worth over $100. I can do fine on my own." Jake's eyes dimmed. "There's no going back, is there?" "Jake, you have your life, and I'm going on my own way. I'm not going back to the north." Those painful words are not so easily forgotten. We were going to remember them. I had been nailed to the cross of shame, and I knew that if I went back, every step would be like stepping on knives. That would be 1,000,000 times more painful than breaking up. Jake took a breath and held my hands, like he used to, warming them up. "I'm sorry for the recording. I tempted you to say that. I didn't touch you that night." My eyes began to water. "Jake, just say you're sorry, just tell me that." He was in pain, trying to remember my face. "I'm sorry." I patted him on the shoulder. I couldn't say, "It's okay." "Jake, please, have a happy life." The snow was coming down hard. I turned away, starting to walk. I almost fell down as the wind caught me. The wind was howling behind me. Was that the wind? Or Jake crying? Dr. Johnson was wearing a camel coat. He stood there, by the lamplight. I could see his face and his sharp, dark eyes. I came closer. He asked, "What did you see?" I brushed the snow off my hat, looking up, my eyes red. "Dr. Johnson." "Yeah? Thank you." A few days later, I saw Jake on the news. He looked thin. He had told the world everything. It was him who had made me talk. It was him who had edited the recordings. He had also showed a contract. It was an agreement between him and Ashley. They were engaged for 2 years, and it was a business deal. They never intended to get married. He exposed his own deceit. It was devastating for Jake's company. His reputation was in ruins. Later, Mike called. "I'm sorry, Chloe. I owe you an explanation." He said he had misjudged Ashley. She had been the one who exposed me. The men who had shaken me down for 50 grand had been looking for me. When I was in the hospital, they had sold the story to Ashley. He asked if I could come back. I said no. I had said all I had to say. The rest was up to them. 3 months later, I was well enough to go home. The sun was warm, and spring was in the air. The smell of disinfectant came into the room. I knew Dr. Johnson was here. "Do you have any snacks? I've been working all day, give me some of it." He was so busy. He always ended up eating at my place. I opened my scarf and showed him the steamed buns I had hidden there. Dr. Johnson took one, and ate it all at once. I stared until he finally said, "What are you staring at?" You're so easy to feed." Dr. Johnson said, "Have you ever thought about living here?" "Why do you say that?" "It's like this. I have an apartment for rent." I paused. "Are you broke?" He looked serious. "I don't have a lot of money, so I can't afford much." "I'm cheap," Dr. Johnson said. "No neighbors, it's scary." I blinked. He looked like he was flirting, but I wasn't sure. When I left the hospital, the spring breeze was so fresh. I had a smile on my face. I forgot to look for cars and nearly got hit. Dr. Johnson grabbed the back of my neck and dragged me back. I landed against his chest. He held my hand. "You." "Yeah, I'm chasing you." He was so casual. Like he was saying, "The weather is nice." My heart began to pound. I looked up and said to Dr. Johnson, "I loved someone for a long time, I don't know." Dr. Johnson's hair was blowing in the wind. "I've loved someone for a long time, too. Let me have a chance." My eyes were wet. I'm not in good shape. I was sick, my body. "Chloe, you always said you wanted everyone to be happy, including you." Dr. Johnson winked at me. "I hope your dream comes true." The wind picked up. The sunlight was in his hair. The spring that I thought would never come had arrived. 13. Jake's perspective. The next winter, Ashley's company went bankrupt. Jake had gotten everyone who had hurt Chloe arrested. After a few more problems, Jake's company was finally okay again. One night, Jake was sitting in his office. The snow was coming down. It was a year since he had been working here nonstop. It felt like a dream. He had remembered that last year it had snowed. Chloe had come to the reunion. When she had seen him and Ashley, she looked confused and hurt. He kept dreaming of her. He made different choices in the dream. He broke the engagement before the party. He had called the cops when he had found Chloe. He hadn't pressured her, and he hadn't said mean things. He had met her again, like she had always wanted. Chloe would have come to him. He would have held her close, and she would have said everything that had happened and cried, finally. Jake would have hugged her, kissed her, and asked her to marry him. They would have had a home. He and Chloe would have had wedding photos. She would have been smiling. But he would wake up alone in bed, listening to the clock. Time was moving forward, but Chloe wasn't there. She had left. That snowy night, Chloe had wished him a happy life. She said that she wouldn't come back. She was sad she never got the reunion she wanted. Her eyes were red. He had hurt her, and she had decided to leave. She didn't blame him. She wished him well. It was a knife in the heart that would never heal. He had developed a stomach problem due to the stress. He woke up in pain and remembered watching the moon with Chloe. It had been in a past life. He wanted to see her again, so he got a ticket to the south. He was back in the same weather. Wind and snow. He found her apartment. It was almost dark, but there were no lights on. Jake waited in the shadows. A half hour later, he heard Chloe's voice. "That place's beef and tomato stew was bad. Next time, you get the beef, and I'll make it. Sarah will like it, too." Jake looked over and saw her. She was wearing a hat. It might have been white or pink or gray. It was white now. She had gained some weight. She didn't sway when she walked. Next to her was a tall man. He had glasses and kept looking at her. He looked at Jake and froze. The two men didn't say a word. "Hey, Dr. Johnson, did you hear me?" It was the same voice, but now she was talking to someone else. Dr. Johnson said, "I heard you. You're going to make beef and tomato stew, but you broke the pot last time. I still need to buy one." Chloe looked sad. "Oh, sorry." Dr. Johnson patted her on the hat, like she was a cute bear. "Go home, the kid hasn't been fed." "Where are you going?" "To buy a pot." "What about the beef?" "I'll buy it all." "So soon?" "Yeah, we have to eat tonight." Chloe walked into the building. Dr. Johnson turned to face him. Jake didn't know what to say, so he said, "Congratulations." Dr. Johnson smiled. "Thank you." He knew that Jake had the wrong idea. The kid was a cat. But he wasn't going to tell him. Last year, he had a chance to speak to her. Chloe and Jake were over. They should just move on. "How is she feeling?" "Okay, Dr. Johnson said. "She's a good girl. She doesn't get mad. She's a great person." Jake knew that she was okay. He knew what she looked like when she was happy. Dr. Johnson's eyes narrowed. "How long have you known her?" 14 years. "You know her better than me. It's almost her birthday. I need a present." "Snacks. She likes snacks, not chocolate." Jake didn't even have to think about it. Dr. Johnson nodded. "Thanks." 14 years. "You know her better than me." That was the meaning. If you knew her so well, why did you treat her so badly? Why did you let her suffer so much? "Jake?" A clear voice cut through the wind. Jake turned. Her face appeared. The curve of her smile was just like the one he remembered. Chloe was holding an umbrella. She was carrying another one. "What are you doing here?" Jake's heart hurt. Her eyes were calm and empty. She had finally let go. He was quiet for a second. "Business, I was passing through, met Dr. Johnson, we spoke." "Passing through? The apartment complex?" Chloe looked confused. Dr. Johnson asked, "Why are you out here?" Chloe gave him the umbrella. "I was worried you'd get sick, so I came to bring you an umbrella." She smiled at Dr. Johnson. It hurt to see that. "You wanna come inside?" Dr. Johnson asked politely. Jake said, "No, I have a late flight." Chloe tucked her coat closed. "Hold on." She ran inside. Dr. Johnson followed her. Jake waited below. The snow was getting worse. The sky was gray, and he felt sick. His stomach was killing him again. Mike called, "Bro." He was quiet. "Your test results came back." Stomach cancer. Jake didn't move, he looked at the snow and said okay. He hung up. He kept waiting, his eyes fixed on the door. A light came from inside, creating a trapezoid of light on the snow. Chloe came out. Dr. Johnson had covered her in so many clothes that she looked like a cotton ball. She was holding a red box, and gave it to Jake. I made cookies, take them with you. Jake accepted it. Chloe always loved to bake. She was always terrible at it, they tasted like raw eggs. He had said that she was banned from his kitchen. Now, she could finally do it. Chloe said, thanks for giving us money. Jake knew they were helping people with mental health problems. They took a small salary, and donated the rest. Jake just said, you're welcome. He was looking at her face. It's cold, go home, I probably won't be back. Chloe smiled. Why not? We'll need to give you an award one day. Jake was choked up, and couldn't say anything. She turned around. The snow was crunching under her boots, and, just before she went inside, she turned back. Jake. Jake looked up. His heart leapt. He was waiting for her to say something. She smiled, Happy New Year. It was just a simple greeting. She didn't even wish him good health. Jake's heart had finally stopped hurting. He stood there and said, Happy New Year.